Good afternoon and welcome to today's presentation on the mind dietary pattern for prevention and delayed onset of neurodegenerative disease in older Australian men and women. My name is Jack Gibson and I'll be taking you through today's talk. A quick look at today's contents. We'll be introducing neurodegenerative disease, talking about who's at risk, why does it occur, and also its prevention. We'll be reviewing the mind diet with a brief overview. We'll also be looking at a summary of the current available scientific evidence, also some recommendations there on how to implement the mind diet at home, and also looking at some practical ideas for cost-effective strategies to help you implement some mind dietary practice at home. And we'll also be reviewing a quick summary there at the end as well. So the best place to start really is by answering the question, what is neurodegenerative disease? Now, this term is used to define a collection of disorders affecting the brain and impairing normal processes like cognition, as well as severe dysfunction in language, intellect, and memory. The term includes disease you may be familiar with, such as dementia and Alzheimer's disease. And while these diseases may commonly affect individuals aged 65 years and over, which is why we're all joined here today, the good news is that it is not considered a normal aspect of aging. Now, this means that there are some strategies available to help us delay or even prevent the onset of cognitive decline in our older age. So a quick summary, it's a collection of disorders affecting the brain function, so language, intellect and memory. It includes Alzheimer's disease in all its forms of dementia, and most commonly affects those aged 65 years and older. So let's have a look at who's at risk. The chart there on the left-hand side shows the leading cause of mortality within Australia. So as you can see, neurodegenerative disease and dementia comes in at number 2 behind heart disease. So significant amount of deaths there are caused by neurodegenerative disease. Now in Australia, dementia affects women disproportionately to their male counterparts. And while it does emerge in individuals aged 65 years and over, it is possible to see early onset in people ranging through their 40s and 50s. Now, there are nearly 500,000 people in Australia currently living with dementia and close to 30,000 people with younger onset dementia. Sadly, these numbers are growing and dementia remains one of Australia's leading causes of death, as we can see by the chart there year on year. So that emphasises the point of looking for strategies today that we can implement that are beneficial for us down the line in years to come, so we can spend more time with our family. Now, the consequence of neurodegenerative disease for the individual is quite severe, with early onset symptoms including progressive and frequent memory loss, as well as confusion. Some people may experience changes to their personality, becoming apathetic or withdrawn from daily life, friends and family, and day-to-day tasks become increasingly difficult to perform. Now, advanced stages of the disease include complete loss of independence, often requiring 24-hour care, and then finally and sadly result in hospitalisation and death. So what are the causes? Obviously, we are going to be taking steps within our current lives to, prevent and avoid developing dementia, particularly in our older age. So it's important to understand that there are several risk factors that increase our chance of developing the disease. Now, these include family history of dementia, depression, serious head injuries, heart disease, also including high blood pressure. There's a family history of dementia, so our genetics, smoking, diabetes, being overweight or obese, and excessive alcohol consumption are all contributing risk factors to the development of the disease. Now, the exact cause of dementia is still being studied, and rather than being narrowed down to one particular thing, we are looking at this collective of risk factors, which we can see over here on the left, that lead to the situation of dementia developing. Now, what is understood is that these collection of risk factors over here lead to a process of information which ultimately results in plaques and tangles being formed in the brain. Now, to present an analogy, if you imagine your brain is the most advanced computer in the world with over 850,000 kilometres of microscopic insulated copper wire sending and receiving electrical messages that you need to recall your friend's name or remember how to cook your favourite meal. These wires are your neurons. Now, to run with the analogy that the neurons are wires, when metals are exposed to oxygen in the air, they undergo a process called oxidation. Now, this produces surface rust. So too, in the way that surface rust is produced on copper wires, can the internal components of our body become oxidized as well. Now, this is called oxidative stress. Now, while the process of rust and oxidative stress are slightly different, the term oxidative stress is a really good one to remember. Now, if we think of the plaques, known as amyloid plaques, as the accumulation of rust outside these wires, which slows down the messaging and interrupts normal function of the brain. Now, these plaques or rust can accumulate on the outside of the brain cells, but they can also accumulate on the inside as well. Now, these are referred to as tangles. Now, these completely stop the brain cell from sending messages and ultimately die, which causes the amount of healthy brain material to be reduced over time. So with the understanding that there's a multitude of risk factors that can contribute to the progression of the disease and the severity of those inflicted, what can we do to prevent or delay dementia? Previous studies have looked at the benefits of adhering to a healthy diet to protect against many diseases. Now, what constitutes a healthy diet? If you reviewed the literature, you'll find that there are two front runners for what may constitute a healthy diet. Now, these are the DASH diet, which is the dietary approaches to stop hypertension, and also the Mediterranean diet, which is more of a cultural style diet. So these diets are very popular with GPs to refer to their patients who are looking to achieve a couple of health outcomes. Now, these are mainly focused around heart health. So key takeouts from these diets is a preference for healthy fats, the use of olive oils. They're very high in fibre, so preferencing whole grains and legumes, very low in red meat consumption. They also include regular fish consumption, and there's even a glass of red wine in there as well. Now, the effects of these diets for brain health has not been extensively studied. In fact, some studies have been quite mixed, saying they confer no benefit for brain health, just mainly predominantly focusing on heart health. That is until recently, when the two were combined and a new diet pattern emerged that focused on brain health. Did you know that only 10% of Australians aged 65 to 74 are consuming the recommended serves of vegetables in their daily life? Great time to introduce the Mediterranean DASH diet intervention for neurodegenerative delay, or MIND diet. Now, the MIND diet, as the name suggests, is a hybridized version of the Mediterranean and DASH diets. Developed in 2015, this dietary pattern sees an emphasis placed on the consumption of dark berries and green leafy vegetables. Now, very similar to the Mediterranean and DASH diets, plant-based foods are emphasised while red meat and saturated fat intakes are limited. Included in the MIND dietary pattern are 10 brain healthy food categories, which consumers are encouraged to eat more of. There are also 5 categories which consumers are advised to consume less of or limit their intakes. Now, when we review one's dietary pattern according to the MIND dietary guidelines, we are able to get a score out of 15. The higher the score confers the lower risk profile for developing neurodegenerative disease. So what does the science say about the MIND diet? One study found that MIND diet score was more predictive of cognitive decline than Mediterranean DASH diets, which means that it is the preferred dietary pattern for the preservation of brain health. Another study found that MIND diet scores between 8.5 and 12.5 had a 53% reduction in risk of developing the disease when compared to lower scores of 2.5 to 6.5. An Australian study conducted over 12 years found a 19% reduction in clinical diagnosis of dementia for those highest MIND scores with a mean of 7.82 when compared to lower scores of around 5. Another study found that MIND dietary pattern was found to improve cognitive resilience independent of disease. So what does this mean? Basically, preserve memory, speed, and spatial ability despite the presence of plaques and tangles in the brain, essentially keeping you younger for longer despite the presence of disease. Now, while the MIND dietary pattern has only been around since 2015 and the availability of evidence is somewhat limited, more studies are emerging and the evidence is mounting in favour of the MIND diet for the preservation of brain health. So how do you plan your Mind diet plate? Well, we have prepared a handy PDF for you to pin to your fridge in order to give you some easy guidelines to plan your weekly meal. As you can see, the Mind Diet Guideline Fridge Companion is a really easy way to review what foods to include in your regular diet and what foods are best avoided. The PDF download is available on request. It's all well and good to talk about eating more berries in our diet, but when we're talking to a room full of retirees, it's very important to understand some lifestyle factors that are going to contribute to how we make these healthy choices. Obviously, we would hope that the children have moved out of home by this age, which means that more often than not, we may be cooking for one, perhaps two people. There is also budget constraints to consider as well. So some practical tips that we can acknowledge are studies have shown that fresh is not necessarily always best. Frozen berries and even frozen vegetables are often a great cost-effective way to increase the amount of vitamins that we're getting in our diet. Now, the freezing process, often because they're flash frozen, can in some cases actually mean that the nutrient content is higher in the frozen counterparts when compared to fresh. Now, a fantastic way to boost our berry intake, 2 cups may seem quite a lot when we're looking at the Mind dietary intake, is simply by consuming roughly 2 tablespoons per day. Now, you could add these to your breakfast cereal. You could have them on a serve of high-protein Greek yogurt. You could puree into a topping or make your own jam. We can use chia seeds instead of sugar as the thickening agent. Or you could also add to smoothies. Now, when it comes to nuts, again, another expensive grocery item. In some cases, for almonds, for example, costing $17 per kilo. Now, with Mind dietary patterns, we're looking at increasing the amount of fibre as well as healthy fats and oils, and included in that list are nuts as well. So the dollar amount can tally up if we're looking to have 1 or 2 serves per day. Now, another great option to keep the costs low is opting for something like pepita seeds or sunflower kernels. Again, very high in those healthy fats and proteins and also fibres, and a great cost-effective way to keep our grocery prices down. Now, in terms of consumption of seeds and nuts, they can be a fantastic addition to salads, or they can be added to breakfast cereals, porridge, or even smoothies. And then finally, when we're looking at proteins, so poultry is included in the Mind dietary pattern, looking at a couple of serves of poultry per week. The best option here is to buy in bulk and freeze. So when we look at packets from Coles or Woolworths, often the larger amount that we buy, the more cost effective it's going to be. So in this regard, opting for a larger, say 1 kilo pack, and then portioning it up into 150 grams or so and freezing in individual packets and then defrosting as needed is a great way to save a little bit of money when we're grocery shopping in accordance with the Mind dietary pattern. So how does the Mind diet look on the plate? Now, in order to further our practical understanding of how to implement some Mind strategies, we've prepared a rough 3-day meal plan here in accordance with Mind guidelines, just to give you an idea on what that looks like. So as you can see, we're including lots of berries, some whole grains. There's some fish in there as well with the sardines, another great way, cost-effective way to get healthy omega-3 fatty acids in our lives. And also a lot of green leafy vegetables included there as well. Brown rice whole grains, some chicken for our lean white protein, broccoli casserole, black bean dip for our legumes there as well. So very, very bright, very colourful, very fresh and very tasty. Then over there on the left as well, just a couple of practical recipe ideas. We have the blueberry overnight oats, a great way to get our whole grain intake up as well as our berries. And then the black bean dip there as well. As you can see, extra virgin olive oil has been included in that, as well as the legumes, which are high in fibre and high in protein. So very easy to eat in line with our MIND guideline. And a brief summary of today's conversation: the MIND diet and dietary patterns are emerging as a key modifiable risk factor to reduce the risk of cognitive decline in older age. Dietary patterns such as the MIND diet can significantly delay onset and progression of the disease. Structured dietary patterns such as the MIND diet may confer benefit to other body systems, so not just our brain. Obviously, it's a blend of the DASH and Mediterranean diets, so we're looking at some heart benefits there as well. The evidence is promising, but more studies are needed and they are emerging. And studies suggest that for best results, dietary interventions should always be coupled with regular physical exercise. So that's it for today. If you had any more questions, please do get in touch, and I wish you all the best in your future dietary endeavours. Thank you.